Hello, everyone. My name is Brady Lund,
My name is Daniel Agbaji.
and as Molly said, we are from Emporia State University in Emporia, Kansas. Today we're going to talk about how to use Universal Design for Learning checklists to ensure accessibility in your individual courses. So briefly, just about who we are. My background, my undergraduate degree was in speech pathology, essentially, and then I received a master's of library science from Emporia State. I am now currently a PhD student here at Emporia State. I've published several articles and several books in just the last couple years on the topic of universal design and accessibility law in the United States.
Yeah, so my background goes as far back as in Nigeria, where I earned my Bachelor of Technology in Information Technology and Library Science. And currently I'm running 2 masters concurrently, and I'll be graduating in December this very year. Yeah! And that will be masters in library science and masters in instructional design and technology. I'm also a full stack software developer, which I got from Claim Academy, and have published several articles also in learning technologies and systems. Yeah, so universal design for learning, we have all known that it's kind of a set of principles that guide the design of spaces so that we'll have a more accessible means of learning for individuals at different levels. And when I mean different levels, I'm talking about including physical, mental, emotional, and social abilities. And oftentimes when we talk about universal design for learning, we often refer to 3 central principles, which Brady later on will be talking more on, and he will also be demonstrating how those principles actually play out whenever you're trying to examine a kind of a resource to ensure that it meets up to those standards and they are being accessible. So we have those 3 central principles. The first one is multiple means of representation, and by that we mean that whatever material or can I say resources that is being presented in form of a means of learning should have variety of format, or can I say different means of assessing them. So you have audio recording as an example of that. You could also have the same audio recording being transcribed in such a way that other people that can't hear but can see could actually access that very material. So that's what we mean by multiple means of representation. So a single learning material or information resource is being replicated in a different format so that different people can actually access it, as the case might be. So we also have the second principle, which is called multiple means of engagement. And by that we mean that users should have choice in how they can actually interact with the content. Users can work through learning content in a linear manner or jump around to the sections they need to review. Not every user actually learn in the same way. So some might want to like access a material, differently from others, and that has a lot to do with, the choice,
And ability.
and the ability as well. So in this context, we refer to that to be multiple means of engagement because someone might want to like, hey, you know what? I don't want to read by chapters, okay? I want to read by, let's say, major points, I want to assess this material in this very manner or in the other. So the third one being multiple means of expression. We know that when it comes to learning, what makes learning much active is that the learner will have to interact with whatever resource he or she is assessing. And when a learner is being told that the only means by which you can actually interact with this information resource is maybe by just reading it, it doesn't make it quite concrete for someone who is more like a visual learner. So users have multiple ways to demonstrate their knowledge of the information presented. So
I'll give an example of this one because I recently took a course where an instructor gave us the opportunity to demonstrate our knowledge of content that we were learning in that given week through whatever means we thought was most suitable to both the information and to our own particular way of expressing our knowledge. And so some students did create a PowerPoint where they could talk about the content and synthesize the content. Some people recorded just audio, just them speaking like as a podcast type format. And some people did write an essay because that's what's most comfortable for them to do, was to write it out in that format. But each of them was acceptable, and really it brought more diversity as far as the grading aspect of the course, that it wasn't so monotonous that you have 2,500 word essays. You now have 5 PowerPoints, 5 essays, 5 audio recordings. So you get to change things up while you're grading a little bit. And so I always say when I'm talking about accessibility or anything to do with making some kind of positive changes for individuals with disabilities, that really these are changes that benefit all stakeholders involved. And really, I feel like the multiple means of expression is really encapsulates what's most important in some ways, and most true to real life as well. If you think about university instructors, there's presenting at conferences, some feel more comfortable doing posters. Some like to do their papers, present their papers. Some facilitate like round table discussions, and so there's different types of sharing the knowledge, the research you've conducted that are generally equal, but each are different and more comfortable for different people. And so it kind of reflects reality in that way as well, I think, and is actually more beneficial in that way.
Yeah, so here we have a chart, and it's a universal design for learning guidelines. As we have earlier stated in the previous slide, you have 3 major principles. And as we have here, the first one is about engagement, the second is about representation, the third is about action and expression. So some of the key aspect of the first one is to provide recruiting interest. And provide options for sustaining effort and also persistence. And it does also provide options for self-regulation. So in other words, when we are trying to engage the learners or whoever is assessing any material, we ensure that all those 3 options are, part of what we are actually doing, to ensure that we recruit interest. I mean, no one would like to read or, can I say, assess or watch or even listen to whatever information resource you're providing in those 3 different formats if there is no form of interest or creating that very interest. And also you need to provide other options for sustaining the effort and persistence, and that is what engagement does. And finally, to ensure that you actually regulate that very options you have created for whoever is assessing that very material. And representation, you have, as you can see on the chart, three major points as well that you have to consider in order for that very resource to meet up to the standard of the Universal Design for Learners. So one of it is to ensure that you provide options for perception, provide options for language and symbols, provide options for comprehension. And I think in a lot of ways, in the previous slide, just like we rightly said, it should be something that is so diverse so learners can actually engage in that very way of assessing that very material in different ways and also express themselves the way they want to. And finally, about action and expression. So we have three major pointers here that we need to put into consideration. So we need to provide options for physical action and provide options for expression and communication, as we can see on the chart, and also provide options for executive functions. And each guideline has multiple descriptions to explain what a guideline entails, as
underneath them here.
Yeah.
This is taken from CAST, which is an organization that, if you are familiar with Universal Design for Learning, you've probably heard of before. They're located in Massachusetts. They were originally affiliated with a couple different organizations, but they've been independent for quite a while at this point. Why is this important? Other than just doing the right thing, it's more and more being mandated, and more universities, institutions of education are being compelled to do so to comply with accessibility guidelines by the government. The most well-known probably is Section 508 Amendment to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. There's some similar amendments in there that mandate physical space design, accessibility, access to websites and such, but it's been interpreted at many universities recently to apply to educational content that you would put like in a learning management system, content you would upload, the learning management system itself, as well as, of course, the website, your organization's website. And so at several universities, compliance is already mandated. I know it is at our university. They explicitly mention Section 508 in the accessibility policy, as well as WCAG 2.1, which is the most recent version, as well as the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that's something everyone at our university has to comply with. But as I say, though not always followed, I think that's definitely true of our university. Unfortunately, I think it will become better, but
yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the publicity of this and trying to reorient or giving the right orientation to different people.
Yeah, so we're not reinventing the wheel with this presentation, but we are, I think, doing something important in disseminating information, synthesizing and disseminating information, and talking about this.
Yeah, because especially when you talk about Universal Design for Learning and online content, a lot of people be like, hey, it's something quite rigorous, especially for faculty members or anyone who is into teaching or deals with learners. But if you get to know that there are kind of simple technologies out there that can actually help you, to make your material accessible, or in a way, give you that confidence that what you're providing to the public, either on, maybe a learning management system or on the website, is very accessible to them. I think that's kind of a confidence in itself and an assurance that you're actually doing something really remarkable. Yeah.
So what we're going to do today is give a demonstration of a UDL scan tool. There are many different versions of these. The one we like the best, and it might be just because It's affiliated with the University of Kansas. It's located in Lawrence, Kansas, and we're about an hour from there, so we're familiar with it. Is there the UDL checklist from the Center of Online Learning. And we're going to evaluate an information literacy module that we retrieved from OER Commons. So this is actually something that the Association for Educational Communications and Technologies brought to my attention when I was finishing or working on a book with them on Section 508. And they pointed out that while open educational resources are excellent cost-saving resources, the creators are not always held to the same standard of accessibility. There are OER organizations out there that are emphasizing accessibility, but that's not always the case. And so these tools can especially be valuable if you're going to use one of these OER resources. I think OER resources are very valuable, but just taking 20 minutes to evaluate them thoroughly and make sure that everyone who's going to be using this module will be able to use it, I think is very wise thing to do. And so fortunately we have this platform here where we can do the web chat, so I thought that was actually really great for what we wanted to demonstrate here. So this is the website for the Center of Online Learning. It's actually on KU's website, centeronlinelearning.res.ku.edu/UDL scan tool. This website is chock full of very helpful resources. You can find everything we're talking about today on this website. We're just bringing it in a different live format where we can kind of synthesize and talk about it all together at once in this kind of brief shot. But if you take the time, this is a really excellent resource to go through and learn more about UDL than we can provide in limited time. The page we're looking at specifically is this UDL scan tool page. You can search for it, or you can find it under resources, UDL scan tool. It is a Google form, so when you click on it, it's going to have you make a copy of their Google form, and it looks like that. It's kind of like a survey. You can distribute it, or you can just view it and complete it yourself, which is probably most likely what you'd be doing, unless you are like your university's kind of learning technologies or accessibility department, and you were sending this out for some reason to all the different professors to evaluate their content. You might distribute it in that way. And when you pull up the form, it's going to look like this. So it'll look like any survey you would get through Google Forms, where you would proceed through. The first page is demographic information. You're going to enter information about, basically just for your benefit as to this describes what you're evaluating, the product you're evaluating. As you continue on to further pages, it's going to ask questions at a more base level compared to kind of what we're seeing with the principles here that are more kind of abstract as to the terminology. The questions that are asked in the scan tool are more readily accessible to somebody who doesn't even have a high level of familiarity with UDL. So, is the text selectable? Does this product offer ways of customizing information? And it actually even adds these illustrative examples, highlighting content. Can you change the text size? Can you control the size of images and the speed of videos? That's going to be very beneficial, like changing the speed of video, very beneficial to somebody who might be hard of hearing, who might comprehend information a little slower and would like to slow down the speed of the video, or conversely want to speed it up because they're consume information quicker, and that's more amenable to how they learn. So those are the types of questions you see in this. Can you change the font size? rather than looking at kind of these abstract principles and trying to try to determine for yourself, does it meet this principle? It's kind of subjective. This is simple, yes or no questions. When you complete the survey form, the Google form, it will then populate this Excel sheet, and you're able to access this from here. You'll be able to click on this responses button, and it will actually pull up this Google spreadsheet form with your information in there. Again, this on its own doesn't tell us a lot, but what is really excellent about Kansas's tool, another reason why I really like their tool, and I'm talking about it today, is they have this UDL scan tool analysis template, which is an Excel spreadsheet that you will download, and you can copy and paste your information from this Google spreadsheet into this Excel spreadsheet. It looks almost exactly the same. This first line will be already populated as it was in the Google spreadsheet. You'll just paste your information in there. And then they have this extra tab down here where you can look at scores. And this is what I found really useful in informing my own content that I make for different sessions I'm teaching or classes that I'm helping professors design. Looking at their content, I use this a lot because this is I'm a visual learner, so these visualizations are very helpful in knowing how well this resource complies with different UDL principles. And so you can see we have each of the three principles here: provide multiple means of representation, provide multiple means of action and expression, provide multiple means of engagement. This tool is going to do everything for you as far as aggregating and figuring out, calculating these numbers based on your responses to those questions in the first part. It is about 126 questions, I believe.
And so it's not likely something you want to just breeze over it, in the snap.
Right. It is going to take a little time.
Yeah.
I think it's worth it.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you kind of get an assurance, or you get, so sitting that, hey, whatever resource you have out there, or placing on maybe a Canvas or any learning management system, could be really accessible to learners. So I mean, it's worth the time and the energy.
Yeah. So this again was an information literacy library instruction module for advanced or upper level college students. So junior, senior, and postgraduate students at the university level. We ran it through that test, and these were the scores you received. And so I would say this is pretty poor. If you have any students who might have problems, for instance, where they might need additional assistance for communication, this scored very poorly in that area. And this was actually one of the better areas. The multiple means of representation, very poor. Compliance with the principles, the UDL principles and guidelines. It just didn't score very well across the board. And to an extent, once you've seen this, you can then refer back to the principles themselves. You can eye the resource, and you can kind of identify where the problems are. So it's kind of, I think, helpful to do it that way, where you do this kind of evaluation, and you see from this feedback how well it scores on some of these principles, how well it conforms to the principles of UDL, and then refer yourself, and also know kind of who your audience is. I think it's always ideal to have your resources as accessible as possible, but I think it's also important to know who your audience is. If it's possible that this resource is the only one that would be available to you, and you don't foresee any potential barriers to individuals enroll in your class, it might be okay. but it's very problematic. This resource, for instance, it had videos with no captions, with no control over volume or speed of the video, with no kind of text explanation of what a video was or what a sound clip was. And so if you had anyone who was hard of hearing, had hearing loss, or was deaf, they would just miss a major section of information that other students would have access to.
Yeah, and I think in a kind of a way, this helps to give you an idea of how much maybe an instructor would have to put into making sure that the learning material meets up to the UDL principle. And if maybe you are the learning technologist in a way in your school, this is kind of a way to ensure that you don't just tell them this material is not meeting up to the standard. You show them, different graphs, and I mean, whoever can actually look through this.
Visualizations are always good for proving a point, I
exactly.
think.
Yeah, because no one having seen this will likely just blush it out. No, everyone will take this really serious. If I happen to be the instructor presenting that very video, I would have to think again and ensure that having an understanding of my students, go back and make a review of that material, and then set something way better than what we have here. I mean, 12 on a scale of 35 is kind of a very low. Yeah, it's pretty
and this tool is often designed for complete learning modules or learning systems, evaluating learning systems. Even you might evaluate an entire learning platform, a learning management system using this tool. It works for individual modules that you would upload into a course. You can adapt it to your needs. Some areas may apply less than others if you're evaluating just a single course assignment. Some of this isn't going to apply, in which case these visualizations might not be as helpful. So just knowing what you're evaluating is probably important as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you everyone for listening to our brief talk.
Yeah.
We have our contact information here. Feel free to contact us, email us if you have any questions. Actually, like I said, I just finished a book for the AECT. As part of that, I created an annotated bibliography that has about 150 resources. And I'm open to freely sharing that with anyone who's interested in resources about universal design, accessibility law. I can get into a lot more detail than we can in this brief thing. I know we've probably skipped over a few things, not put as much attention as we could, but we had to kind of go with our time limit here. So I also have a video here. This is basically just a video of us, or me, discussing this in just a really brief 8-minute format as opposed to this little bit longer format.
Yeah, so feel free if you have any questions to ask. We are open to answering your questions. I will try to be as brief as possible since we are running out of time.